So having opened up with a couple of curly industrial issues for you today to consider, I'm delighted to welcome the Minister for Employment to the podium. Eric Abetz has been an Australian politician and a Liberal Party member of the Australian Senate since February of 1994, representing the state of Tasmania. Eric has been the Minister for Employment and the Leader of the Government in the Senate in the Abetz government since the 18th of September 2013, and he previously served as Special Minister of State in the Howard government from 2001 to 2006. So I wish everyone would join with me, thanks, and welcome Senator, the Honourable Eric Abetz to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be back with you. It was some 2 years ago when I had a lot longer title that I had the privilege of addressing this organisation, and the length of the title was at both ends. I had the term shadow in front of my title and workplace relations. So having been Shadow Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, I'm delighted to appear before you as simply the Minister for Employment, amongst other things. Can I congratulate Aptia and BIC for the wonderful work they do, and despite what, if I might self-describe, the situation in the Senate at the moment as being somewhat testing, when I was given this invitation, I said, look, this is a must-do for me, despite the very short nature of my presence with you, because of the wonderful work that Aptia and BIC have done in helping to inform and advise the Coalition on policy settings whilst in opposition and in government. So I want to pay tribute to your office bearers and to your organisation for the wonderful work they do, and be assured that they are highly respected, well listened to, but of course at the end of the day we have to make our own decisions, but we are very well informed by your organisation. From the government's point of view, our approach on workplace relations is very simple. It's all about employment. And that is why the Prime Minister shortened the title. Workplace relations, yep, a lot of people get all excited about the nuances here and there and people negotiating, but what, from a government point of view, is the ultimate goal? It is employment, to ensure that as many Australians as possible can get gainful employment. And as a government, we fully realise that if you get the parameters wrong in this space, you can really muck up your national economy. Get it right, and you can really help your economy. That's on the macro, on the big level. On the micro level, if you get it wrong, you can really muck up a household's economy and the security of a family, and as a result, cause a lot of social dislocation. However, if you get it right, you can provide the sort of security which allows people to invest in a home, invest in their children's future, and feel safe and secure in the society in which they live. And so that's, in a nutshell, if you like, the driver of our approach to matters workplace relations. At the last election, we took a 38-page policy to the people of Australia. We debated it with Bill Shorten, nationally televised, you name it, we did it, announced well and truly in advance, and we said that there would be no surprises, and there haven't been. First, allow me to deal with the issue of registered organisations, because this organisation is a registered organisation. We do have legislation before the Parliament which has been rejected twice. It is legislation designed to ensure that those that are given the honour of being office bearers in registered organisations remain true and faithful, especially financially, to their membership. And we saw some glaring examples of where that did not occur in recent times. Think Michael Williamson, think Craig Thompson. In our legislation, we also wanted to undo some of the ridiculous constraints put on the legislation by Mr Shorten in the dying days of the Labor government. So, for example, shop stewards have to disclose, for example, what the spouse earns, what the family home and other assets they may have. Completely irrelevant unless you are in the business of financial management of that organisation. Similarly, we believe that if you are a qualified accountant, you don't have to go with respect to the Fair Work Commission's kindergarten to explain to you your fiduciary duties in running an organisation. So in our bill, we would have stripped out a lot of that red tape. Regrettably, there were certain senators that did not want that to pass because they were scared of the higher penalties. I am reassured by the fact that there were many in the Labor movement who said this is good legislation. A former Labor Attorney General, Rob McClelland, a current Fair Work Commissioner, Ian Cambridge. We've had trade union officials like Paul Howes, and Martin Ferguson, Simon Crean, all saying that basically if you're good, upright, solid trade union official, you've got nothing to fear and unions would be protected. Regrettably, it does cover other organisations that don't have those sort of that sort of history, but if I might say, I think stripping out all the red tape that we were hoping to would have alleviated that from the employer organisation's point of view. Let me turn to the Fair Work Amendment Bill, and might I add, all our policies have now been put into legislative form and are awaiting consideration in the Senate. The Fair Work Amendment Bill has a whole host of aspects to it, but one that I would want to concentrate on because I think it may be of interest to this particular organisation, given that you represent, as I understand it, many family businesses as well and small businesses right around Australia. The individual flexibility arrangements, fleshing them out to make them more workable, we believe makes good sense. At the end of the day, the worker has to be better off overall. And I simply say to anybody that stands in opposition to this proposal, why would you want a worker not to be able to be better off overall? Why would you stand in the way of that? And the only reason is that there are certain officials of certain organisations that want to see everybody in a particular role, in a particular way, over which they have full control. And that is how they maintain their control, keep their control, and I simply ask the question, why is their control more important than the individual benefits that could flow to both the worker and to the organisation? So individual flexibility arrangements is something that I would urge you in your various states as an organisation to go back to your independent senators. I won't bother listing all of them, but there are 8 of them around the nation, and if you are a bus contractor, if you are a private operator, I would encourage you to make an appointment with your local independent senators and say, why would you be minded to vote against a piece of legislation that will actually allow my business the flexibility it needs whilst ensuring that the worker is better off overall? That's a wonderful win-win for the worker, for the business, for the economy, for everybody. Who's the loser? And I would encourage you to engage in that discussion. I'm not sure whether right of entry is much of an issue for you, but that is another issue that this bill seeks to deal with. Basically, before the 2007 election, Ms Gillard promised the Australian people no change to the right of entry rules. Regrettably, having made that promise at the National Press Club with all sorts of promises attached to it, I'll take a polygraph, I'll sign it in blood, you can take my mother as a hostage, all sorts of flowery language. Can I say, I'm not sure what she thinks of her mother, but that aside, because then she legislated and gave unions powers of entry unprecedented in the nation's history. And we said we would implement Labor's expressed 2007 policy, namely that the policy that Julia Gillard was announcing and supporting in 2007 at the National Press Club would be the one that we would be pursuing if we gain government. The other issue is closing the strike first, talk later loophole. Mr Rudd promised the Australian people that a new Fair Work Act would not allow people to strike before they were engaged in meaningful discussion. We now know, courtesy of a court case, the J.J. Richards case, that that is in fact allowed. When that decision came down, I immediately said to the then government, this is clearly an error in the drafting because you promised that would not be allowed. Therefore, if you want to get a legislative amendment through the Parliament quick smart, we will facilitate its passage in a matter of 24 hours or in whatever time you want. As you might imagine, that kind offer was not taken up. The reason, it was not a legislative mistake, it was deliberate to basically give the trade unions a lot more power that they could go on strike before engaging in meaningful discussion. We want to implement Kevin Rudd's policy to the Australian people. Can I turn to the Productivity Commission review and congratulate APTA and BIC for being actively involved in this process. We announced this process well before the last election. Indeed, when Labor introduced their Fair Work Bill, we said it should be subjected to a regulatory impact statement. It was not. As a result, 2 years later, they had a review, hand-picked people with skewed terms of reference. We said a proper review should take place. That proper review should have been the Productivity Commission. It did not occur. We said we would, and we now have that Productivity Commission review being undertaken. It is wide and it is open to you as an organisation to put in a submission. It's also open to you as an individual, if you want to. On the website, there's access to put a 100-word comment on it, if you like. Just saying what concerns you, that you want better flexibility arrangements, or that minimum hours of engagement is a concern to you. Anyone and everyone can have input, and I encourage everybody to do so. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to have a look at the framework, and that is what we are seeking to do. Now, this Productivity Commission review has been demonised by some, and when I remind them that this is the Productivity Commission that the Labor Party used to help establish the National Disability Insurance Scheme, it's the same Productivity Commission that was entrusted to look at issues childcare, economically robust, socially sensitive. Why wouldn't you entrust the Productivity Commission to also look at the workplace relations framework? Indeed, I was in Melbourne just last week, and somebody said, why on earth would you have the Productivity Commission look at workplace relations? What expertise have they got, thinking they were extremely smart? I then asked, well, what expertise do they have in disability issues? What expertise do they have in childcare? But we have accepted their reports, and it sat the person down, because the Productivity Commission has the capacity to look at these issues in an objective manner. I encourage you to get involved. The only people that have anything to fear from such an evidence-based inquiry are those people that know that the evidence won't match their rhetoric, that they won't be able to back up their public assertions with the evidence that the Productivity Commission will be seeking from them. So I encourage you to be actively involved in that. It will report towards the end of this year. We will go through its report and recommendations and then determine that which, if anything, or all of it, depending on what we make of that report, and after consulting widely, we will determine that which from that report we will take to the 2016 election and seek a mandate from the Australian people. It would be fair to say our history in this space has not been good with the Australian people, and we have to take it on a step-by-step basis to ensure that the Australian people re-engage with us on matters workplace relations. I believe we nearly got there in 2010. In 2013, they trusted us not to break our word, and I am determined that we not break our word. As a result, anything that comes out of the Productivity Commission review will be taken to the 2016 election. There's the 4-yearly review of modern awards. I'm not sure if APTA and BIC are involved in that, and I see a head nod, and they are. I would encourage you to make good, robust cases. In recent times, we have seen decisions come out of the Fair Work Commission and employers and unions come together, realising that some of the conditions that are currently in workplace agreements or modern awards are mitigating against employment and employment opportunities. It is vitally important that we get the balance right to ensure that we get the maximum employment within our community, but still at wages that are acceptable. We've also dealt with some of the issues for small business. We have ensured that we established a hotline, which we promised, which has now received, I think, over 150,000 calls, going extremely well, and the feedback from the small business sector is that it's exceptionally helpful. We've also created a guide to hiring a new employee. Really, why do you have to tell government instrumentalities that it would be a good idea to develop a document to assist small business to hire new employees? That should be their focus. That is what we encourage them to do, and I'm delighted that they've now done so. And we have been cutting red tape, in fact getting rid of 10,000 pieces of outdated legislation, but more importantly, cutting the red tape burden to business by over $2 billion thus far. So we've got an extensive policy agenda. We're excited about it, but we are being blocked in the Senate, especially by Mr Shorten and the Labor Party. That is why we rely on the crossbench, and therefore any advocacy people in this room and your members throughout the various states and territories can engage with their crossbench senators, the better for us being able to get good public policy through the Senate. Thank you very much for allowing me to address you this morning.
Thanks, Eric. On my watch, Eric still has 5 minutes.
Yeah.
When Josh up the back turns into a pumpkin, you know that 5 minutes is gone and that Eric must be out of here.
Yeah.
So we do have time for 5 minutes of questions. So would anybody like to start questions off? We've got 5 minutes, so they should be short. I'm sure Eric's answers will be short. By the way, mate, good, robust cases is what we're actually good at. You know that?
Yes, yeah.
Up the back there,
Yeah.
Tim. Announce who you are.
Sorry, Tim Kaplan, Piper Relations Lawyer. The legislation you put forward is exactly consistent with your policy, and there's nothing in it that should concern unions or employees or anyone else in business. I'm surprised the crossbench is a concern with it. In your negotiations with the independents in the Senate, I assume there are items that they would accept. Are you contemplating putting together a package which is essentially the bits you can get through and put that to the Parliament, so at least we get some progress on your policy platform being implemented?
Look, what you say makes common sense, and I'm delighted to report to you that I am actively engaged in discussions with the crossbenchers across those along those lines. So, for example, the Greenfields Agreement section of the legislation, which I assume is of no relevance here, but some of the crossbench senators say vitally important for our resource sector. We'll support that, but the annual leave stuff we've got some problems with, and so what I'm trying to do is find out where there is commonality amongst the crossbench. But as you might imagine, being a one-person band is a huge task as a senator when one day you're dealing with carbon tax, then a mining tax, then temporary protection visas, then national security, actually being able to spend quality time with them, going through the separate provisions of the bills does take some time, but that's exactly our approach, and anything we can get through the Senate, we will.
Anybody else out there would like a question? I just want to ask Eric one question of you, and that is our chairperson today announced our position in the Productivity Commission inquiry. Recently, the Fair Work Commission has suspended protected action in the electricity industry on the basis of the threat it was to the public. They have in the past in Victoria in the ambulance sector. We in the public transport industry believe that we as a country could follow the lead that England, Singapore, Canada has shown in relation to public transport being an essential service. Everybody in this room would agree that public transport is an essential service. Do you?
Well, if everybody agrees with it, I know the exit door's there. I doubt that I'll get out if I disagree. So at this stage, let me say, subject to all the arguments being ventilated, I think it's a very strong case.
Okay, well, I can see Josh turning green.
All right.
Would you thank the Minister very much? He is a terrific fellow.
Thank you very much.
We're just going to have a 5-minute break because APSI was mentioning that next door they can hear everything that we're saying. So for fear of actually educating the technical guys as well, we're just going to have 2 minutes while something's going to happen. I don't know what it is. I think they're giving them earmuffs or something, but we'll call you in 2 secs.